Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's session on Drafting Your Purpose with Elizha Corpus. We're so happy that you are spending another lockdown evening with us, and hopefully, this will help you refine also your job search strategy. Before I hand you over to Elijah, I wanted to do a quick introduction for her. So, me and Elijah were undergrad students, batchmates actually, in our undergrad course psychology from UP Diliman. Then after that, she went to the States to take on her master's degree. And after that, she joined the learning and development team of me and
Microsoft.
Elijah were, but now she's back here in the Philippines with us precisely because she did what she's gonna be teaching you guys tonight because she drafted her purpose and she realized that a big part of that purpose is going back here in the Philippines and trying to teach individuals and organizations here what she learned from abroad. So some of the best practices she's learned from Microsoft culture, she's been sharing with a lot of like HR professionals here through her consulting now. So while we're waiting for a bit, some of you to still like hop on our live and catch up, I'll be sending you over to Elijah. I'll be disappearing in a bit because she's prepared an activity for us for while we're waiting for the rest to join. So I hope you enjoy this session, this very special session that she's prepared for our learners here in Niab. And then I'll see you guys at the end for some question and answer. But and of course, as usual with our sessions, you can comment your questions at any point during the session and we'll be reading them later at the end. All right. So I'll see you guys later. Welcome, Elijah.
All right, thank you, Deirdre, and hi everyone. Good evening. It's so nice to spend Thursday evening with all of you, almost Friday. So, like Deirdre said, we'll wait around a minute or two for more people to join in. So, while we're doing that, you can start answering this question. We are doing this to test your chat. And so, what are you most looking forward to doing after the ECQ is lifted? So, go ahead and type that down in the chat window. And I'm doing that too. That's why I'm on my phone. Hey, so I see we have around 11 people on here. You can go ahead and start typing just so we're sure your chat is working. We are going to use that throughout the session. Have a haircut, yes. Have you guys been seeing those videos of people cutting their own hair? I'm just glad it's working out for them. All right. So maybe one more person to give us a preview of what you'll do after the ECQ. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Yes, eating in restaurants again. I am looking forward to that too. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started officially. So, again, good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you today and talk about drafting your purpose. Usually, how I do this is it's a 3 hour workshop and usually in person. But for today, I want to just give you a preview of what a purpose is and what kind of direction or value it has for a person. And so hopefully that's what you'll walk away with after our session today. A quick introduction. So my name is Elizha Corpus. Like what Deirdre said, we were actually in undergrad together in psychology, UP Diliman. And then right after that, I went to Michigan State University to do my master's in HR. I thought that after my master's, I was going to go home, but actually, I was lucky enough to get a job with Microsoft's Global Learning and Development team. So from Michigan, I moved to Seattle, Washington. There in Microsoft, culture was the number one element that we were trying to develop. And if you think about culture, having a clear purpose is really one of those essential building blocks that you need. We'll talk about that more later, and I'll be talking about my experience a lot over the next hour or so. And then in 2018, like what Deirdre mentioned, I decided to come back here and work on my purpose here in the Philippines. So for today, I'll give you my perspective as number one, an HR practitioner. I can let you know what do we look for in candidates when it comes to describing their purpose and their why, or really why they're even looking for that job in the first place. And then the second perspective I can come with is as a consultant. As a consultant, I work with different organizations, big and small, different industries. And so I want to give you a preview of how important purpose is slowly becoming for all of these companies. And then the third perspective really is just as a normal person who also went through a roller coaster of a job search process. And I'm also still in the middle of figuring out my whole career, basically. And that's a perspective that I hope I can also bring today. Just some ground rules to quickly set how we will interact with each other today. So, number one, listen to understand. There may be some concepts that are new for you. And so just make sure to listen and try to take it all in. Next, ask to learn. This is super, super important. We are watching the chat window, so just ask there. And I'll try to answer your questions as we go along, but if I forget something, please just bring it up again at the end. And then lastly, check for insights. As we go along, I encourage you to open up a notebook or open up a document in your computer. Just type down lines that strike you, or maybe some insights that you're getting while we're going along so you don't forget them. All right. So we get to the first interactive part of our night together. And we are going to use your Facebook Live poll. So in a while, a poll question will come up on your screen. And then if you could just answer that question, that would be great. All right, so this poll is so we can get to know what category best applies to you. So you will be asked if you're a college student or if you're graduating from college this semester, if you've been working for about 1 to 2 years now, or if you've been working for 3 or more years. Next, so just wait for that poll for a bit. If you're a or if you're graduating from college this semester. All right, so I'm watching my phone and the poll just popped up. So I'm pretty sure that's also happening for you right now. Okay, so it looks like most of us here have been working for 3+ years. All right, so good to know. There is one person graduating this semester. Congratulations to you. I hope you do get to celebrate your graduation after all of this. Okay, so I'm just going back to the slides here. So thank you so much for answering that poll. It's always good to know who we have in the room, just so we can tailor fit some of our examples for that group. So just to set some expectations here, you are not going to walk away from this session with your own purpose statement written out. It's simply not possible to do something like that in an hour. But what we are going to do is, number one, we are going to try to gain some insights on the importance of having purpose as someone's anchor in life. Next, we want to deepen our understanding of what purpose is. And I'll try to do that by giving you an example of my own journey of how I've refined and drafted and refined again my purpose and what I'm doing with it now. And then lastly, we are going to get some tips that hopefully will support you as you start to draft that purpose and also use it in your job hunt. So let's start with a little bit of a story. So September 30, 2014. September 30 is actually my birthday, and September 30, 2014 was the first birthday that I had to spend it away from home. So no best friends, no family. And as you can tell, it can get pretty sad if you're doing that and experiencing that for the first time. But that night of September 30, 2014, we had another round of information sessions. Info sessions, as what we call them, every night for August to September. So just imagine, every night, August to September, we would have 2 or 3 companies coming over to our school and giving us a special program to introduce their company. So it's basically recruiters coming in to try to get us to apply for their organizations. And we had this every single night, very tiring because you have to go there and dress up in your professional suits and talk to recruiters. And so that day, because I was already feeling a bit down, because I was spending my birthday alone, I figured, okay, I'm going to skip the info session because it was Microsoft. Like, how am I even going to get in Microsoft anyway, right? So that's where I was at. But someone told me that there's free food and people are going out after. And so I figured, okay, maybe this is a good way for me to celebrate my birthday, get some good food for free, and then go out with new friends from school after. And so I turned up 5 minutes late. I was late because it was all unplanned and I was just rushing. Showed up late, the whole room was full, and the only missing chair, you guessed it right, is in the very front where the person talking from Microsoft can see me. And so I walk over to the front of the seating arrangement and just embarrassed, super, super embarrassed. I just sat there. But then they started introducing the company with the company purpose. So Microsoft's purpose was empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. They talked about growth mindset, they talked about diversity and inclusion and all of their cultural attributes. The recruiters that they sent, they talked about their career mistakes and how they've made it to where they are now and how they were still continuing to make a lot of mistakes. And I was hooked. I think at that point, I already knew about purpose. Like, this is something that you hear everyone talk about. But it was my first time really seeing it in such a real way. It was the first time for me to see a company as big as Microsoft, they're all over the world, actually taking the time to do it, to invest money and people and time to get that culture started, to get their purpose drafted and written up. And so I that's the first time I felt it. Like, when something makes you kilig and for some reason like it makes you really happy and you're just there smiling, like that was me in that information session with Microsoft. Like, for some reason, i I just knew that it fit. And it just made me really happy to be there after I heard their purpose. So why am I telling you this story, right? Because I think having a purpose, it can really start a spark in you. And not just in you, it can start a spark in the people who hear your story, the people who hear about your purpose. And so this is what we'll try to unpack in this first part of our hour together. I'll share with you a little bit of background about myself and what I knew then. Because even though this is specific to me, I think this can show you that you don't need to have a beautifully drafted purpose statement from the very beginning. Even just the exercise of trying it out or trying to think about it can really benefit you. And so at the time, what did I know? I knew that I liked HR. Specifically, I liked org development, learning and development, and those are the areas I want to play in. At the time, I knew that I wanted to go back home. Someday, maybe after my master's, who knows? And at the time, my draft purpose was to use my knowledge in psychology and knowledge about leadership and teams to solve organizational people problems. So at that time, that was sort of what I would talk about. The other aspect that I think really helped me to draft my purpose is thinking of what I want to know. So at the time, I wanted to see how a company does culture transformation in such a large scale. Before Microsoft, I only had some internship experiences in the Philippines. And even though they were with multinational companies, they weren't going after cultural transformation in a scale as huge as Microsoft. And then I also wanted to know, is it really so bad in the Philippines? Are we really behind? Like, are we really not catching up with the latest trends and the latest research? So, those are things I wanted to learn about. I hope by seeing this, you can see that even just a draft or a vague idea of what you already know and what you'd like to learn more about, these are things that can help you start that purpose. And even though these were just in draft form, they helped to give me that spark. So I could talk about what I want and I could talk about why I wanted to be in Microsoft, why I want to get in that company. So it is a good practice at this point. For us to start defining purpose, right? Purpose, according to some psychologists who study it, is a moral strength that encompasses future directedness, long term goal commitment, connection to something larger than the self, and action in service of the greater good. Purpose can be confused with meaning or finding meaning. And that's because a lot of writers would talk about them interchangeably. But I like this study, so this Malin, Liao, and Damon study in 2017, because they tried to define the difference of purpose and meaning. So according to them, purpose is a subset of meaning. Meaning is something more like feeling fulfillment. So it's very inward, it's very looking in you. Purpose, on the other hand, it has an externality to it. So it's something that is connecting your inside with something that's outside of you. It's contributing to something outside of oneself. And then the other thing I like about purpose, that's why my personal bias is to talk about purpose more. Purpose is always directed towards accomplishing a goal. So it's not like meaning that can exist outside of having a goal. The very definition of purpose in itself tells you that it has to be going somewhere. It has to be targeting something. In short form, what I like to say is purpose is really just the impact that you can uniquely create and that you want to create. It's something that is unique to you, maybe a talent or a strength that you feel you can really contribute, and it's something you want to contribute. So it's motivating, it's internally something that drives you to get there. It can be something scary, something that excites you, and maybe not everyone around you sees the need for it, but it's something you see and you go after. So hopefully that sort of helps set the ground as to what purpose is and why it's even worth it to talk about it. So now we go to my top three tough tips. You are going to see this slide throughout the whole presentation, just as a warning. If you think about it, purpose is really that thing that gives you coherence, focus, and direction. Coherence, focus, and direction, this is where the spark is coming from. So, right, I mentioned earlier that when I was in that info session, for some reason, I was just really happy to hear about their purpose. And it was a feeling of inspiration or kilig or I don't know, whatever you call it. And then now that I think about it, maybe it was because I understood easily the company's coherence, focus, and direction. So, what are those three things, right? Coherence is something that creates connection and understandability. It's a logical connection that leads to you being able to feel the whole coming together. And so maybe you're interested in many different hobbies, different passions. Your purpose, because it gives coherence, might be the thing that shows the connection between and among all those different hobbies. Next, focus. Focus is something that converges to a perceived point. So it directs your attention towards something. The key here is it's directed forward. There's something you want to do or would like to happen. There's a desire to do something using those connected talents and strengths. And then lastly, direction. Direction is that orientation towards a goal that services to guide or to motivate. The direction is that motivational driver to it. So there's a reason. There should be a reason behind that something that you want to focus on. So with that, right, we know that purpose gives us the focus, the direction, the coherence. But if you think about it, what does purpose lead to? That's always a question I get. Like, yeah, so what if I can define my purpose? What does that help me with? If we look at what the research says, so this one from Damon, Menon, and Cotton Bronk that they did in 2003, they tried to look at different studies that aimed to distinguish purpose as a construct. So what they found was young people who express purpose, they show number one, a higher degree of consolidated identities, and number two, they show a deeper sense of meaning. So if you think about earlier, right, we said purpose gives coherence. So maybe that's why young people who have a purpose written up, who have a purpose drafted, they can, through those turbulent adolescent years, they can sort of pull bits and pieces from it to make sense of who they're becoming and of who they are. So that's why we're saying there's a higher degree of consolidated identity. And then also there's a deeper sense of meaning that they're experiencing. This is a line that they mentioned directly in that study. And I like it because it points out that sometimes as you discover things you've written or things you expressed when you were younger, you'll see that some of those ideas are things that are connected to what you'd like to do or things that you're already doing as an adult. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the value of purpose, it goes beyond adolescence. It's something that you can get the good effects of even as you grow older. And then also, it plays a role in positive self development. A thing to remember about this research, though, is there's not a lot yet that's been done looking at cultural, socioeconomic, and historical effects. And so it's good for us to talk about purpose, but this is a sort of a caution saying that don't feel so pressured if it's something you can't find yet or if you feel like your purpose is something you can't go after yet because we all have different backgrounds that we're coming from and maybe background that context you're coming from is influencing that ability to go after your purpose. So there's not a lot yet that we know about that, and that's why it's a good caution to think about. So now we review our top three tough tips, right? So we said purpose gives you coherence, focus, and direction. There's this line by Steve Jobs that I'm sure maybe you've heard of about the he said that you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them if you're looking back. And so what he's trying to say is the things that you do in life or the decisions that you've made, they don't really make sense when you're just trying to look to the future, but they start making sense when you're reflecting back on the past. And I really, really do agree with that. That's why I love that line. But I also think that there's some value in trying to connect your dots even early on in life. So you can say that you're still young, a lot of things are going to change, you haven't figured things out yet, but just the act of trying to make the dots connect together, that can already give you that coherence, focus, and direction that, as we've seen in the previous slide, it can really influence you as you grow older in life. So hopefully you got that and you remember this first tip. So next story. So now we move to September 30, 2016, 2 years after 2014. So again, it's my birthday, right? But this time, what happened that week was I was in a workshop. And this workshop was facilitated by one of the best facilitators I've ever had in my life. So that person's name is Simon. What Simon did was, in the beginning of the workshop, he told everyone. So this is about 30 people in the room, very high level, like directors, VP level people. And so he told them, introduce yourself. We'll go around. Everyone should introduce themselves. Okay, so we start, right? And everyone goes like this. Hi, I'm Elizha Corpus. I am with the Global Learning and Development team. I manage global onboarding for 20,000 new hires every year. And then the next person goes, hi, my name is Anna. I am a VP for Surface Pro. I manage the production lines for the device. And so everyone, all 30 people, that's how we introduce ourselves. And then Simon's turn happens. And what Simon says is, hi, I'm Simon. I have a child who has autism, and so I dedicate my life to finding inclusive learning opportunities so that everyone can learn no matter what situation you're in. And then we all just stopped and we're like, oh, okay, so that's a way, way better way to introduce oneself. And he just owned all of us because we all just went to our default mode, which was to introduce your position and what you do in life. And so what's the point of that story, right? Drafting your purpose, it can help highlight your essence. If you just think about how I introduced myself then, right? I manage global onboarding, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yes, that's important, but that's not the essence of who I am. That's not the essence of why I do what I do. Compare it with how Simon did his, right? Even from those few sentences, you can tell what matters to him and what he's trying to dedicate his life to. And so that's what the purpose does. It helps you highlight your essence. It's highlighting the importance of purpose as an anchor so you can showcase yourself to the world. So let me tell you another quick tip here. What does it mean to order spirit forward? So I'm not sure if all of you are old enough to be in a bar, but I'll share a tip here that might be useful for you, a practical tip. So spirit forward cocktails, these are called spirit forward because you taste the main base, so the spirit alcohol. It's not masked by juices or syrups or whatever. And so you order it so you can taste the spirit. It's very strong, and you order it because you want to savor that taste of the alcohol. The opposite of a spirit forward cocktail is a citrus cocktail, which is masked by a lot of juices and syrups. And so you don't really taste the main spirit that much. So what am I saying here, right? I'm not saying you should practice and go to a bar. What I'm saying is you want to be a spirit forward cocktail versus a citrus cocktail when it comes to your purpose. So our next tough tip is live purpose forward. If you highlight your purpose, you're highlighting what makes you you. That's what you're making evident in the different interactions that you're in. And if that's what you're making evident, then that's what people will see. If you think about it, a spirit forward cocktail gives you the essence of that drink. And so if you live your life purpose forward, you're giving people the essence of who you are. Okay? So, how these two tough tips are related is if you think about number one, purpose gives you coherence, focus, and direction. This is very more internal to you. Number two, which is to live purpose forward, is more external and how other people might see you. This is very a useful tip if you think about job hunting. If you introduce yourself purpose forward, you're more memorable because that's what people will remember. So now that we've established using your purpose as a way to introduce yourself, now you think about it, right? Now, how do companies introduce themselves? Sometimes they use their vision, sometimes it's a mission, sometimes it's both, and it can get confusing. And so it might be useful to line up the differences here a little bit. The traditional definition is a vision gives you what the organization will look like in the future. Mission is what they do. A purpose is more around the why. Why does the organization exist? And sometimes the purpose also adds the two up. So, for example, I'll give you Disney's as an example. The vision of Disney is to be one of the world's leading producers and providers of entertainment. The mission is to entertain, inform, inspire people through the power of unparalleled storytelling, reflecting the creative minds and innovative technologies that make ours the world's premier entertainment company. And then the purpose is to create happiness for others. So that's one way more traditional companies define it. But the thing that's been happening over the past, I would say 5 years, is now companies are deciding which ones to highlight. So, for example, for Microsoft, they just highlight their purpose when they introduce themselves. They don't really talk about the vision or the mission anymore. Which one is better? Nothing is better. It's up to the company. As long as the most important thing is that employees get to know that company and can introduce that company very easily. That's why I think for me, my personal bias is towards purpose because it's very easy to memorize one sentence versus the vision and the mission, which can get a little long. So that's really the value of a purpose for me. Okay. So quick review, right? Number one, purpose is something that gives you coherence, focus, direction. Number two, and what we just talked about is purpose is a good way to introduce yourself because if you introduce purpose forward, it gives people the essence of who you are. And now we're moving to our third story. So again, September 30, 2018. And again, it's my birthday. But this time, where was I? I was on vacation in Switzerland. And for people who have seen Crash Landing on You, I was Yoon Seri being all sad and mopey, walking around Switzerland. Because this was the time that I had just left America to come back to the Philippines. And so that was a very, very heavy decision for me. And up until now, it's something that's really hard to explain. You know, I loved my job in the States. I loved being there. As you can probably tell, I love Microsoft very much. The people I worked with, they were just the best people in the world. And so I had a really, really good life. It was beautiful. But there was always this nagging feeling inside of me that I wanted to go home. Yes, it's because my family and all my friends, they're home. But if I think about it, I think it's really because of purpose. I spent a lot of time in Microsoft thinking about what is my purpose and what do I want to do with my life. And I think at that point I just realized that I have learned so many things from America, and I would love to go back to the Philippines and start to apply those things, to share them with as many people as I could. And also that month I realized that, all my life the next thing was ready for me. Before graduating college, like around end of January, I already knew that I got into my school. So I didn't have those lag months where I was questioning, oh, who am I? What do I want to do? Like, I've never had that. And then suddenly I quit my job and I'm going back home. And for me, that was really the first time that I had to make decisions about what I want to do next. I had to make decisions about how I want to interact with others and what I want to do with my life. And so the point here is drafting your purpose can be that bridge that you have with yourself and the people, the world around you. I think at that point, that was when I realized that, I love working in companies and my purpose is still related to teams, still related to leadership. But I was starting to see that these kinds of problems we do in an organizational setting, there are also things that you see in the societal setting. These are systemic problems that you can solve with an organizational perspective. And so that's when that purpose came to light for me. Here's where I want to introduce you to the part of a purpose statement so you can see what I mean by bridging yourself to the world around you. So you'll see up here my purpose, which is guiding individuals and organizations towards defining and creating their desired impact on the world. First, you have the how. The how is, I always say, it's usually a verb that can describe the things you do. So for me, why is it guiding? It's guiding because when I give workshops, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm only here to facilitate the learning. When I'm coaching, I'm not giving people advice. I'm only there to create a space so that people can give their own selves their own advice. When I'm consulting with companies, it's not about dictating the strategy. It's just guiding the right people to get the right things done. And so for me, guiding is really what encapsulates everything that I do. The next part is individuals and organizations, which will tell you for who. It's important in a purpose statement that you specify who are you contributing this to? Who are you trying to influence? And then the last part is to what result or what impact. So if you think about the people who you're trying to work with or partner with, what is the change that you hope you can contribute for them? And for me, it's really, I hope people and organizations can realize more that they have an impact on the world and be more motivated to go after that impact intentionally. So this is mine. Hopefully, seeing this format broken down can also help you think about your own purpose statement. So now we have a little poll for you again. And I want to ask you, should a person's purpose change over time? We'll get the poll up in a few seconds here. Okay, so just go ahead and answer that poll once it pops up on your screen. Okay, I'm being told that there are yeses so far. All right, and I think we can go ahead and go back to the presentation here. And yes, I'm so glad that a lot of you are voting yes because tell you what, for different audiences, usually the ones who have come into the topic of purpose, maybe like 10 or so years ago, before purpose was this thing that you had to look for, this thing that you had to work your whole life towards. But I think we're slowly moving into this phase where we're all accepting that things can change and life is a little bit more fluid than it was before. And so yes, a person's purpose can change over time, which gets us to our last tough tip for tonight. Having a draft purpose, it gives you something to refine. So even if a purpose is something that can change, it doesn't give you an excuse to not do it, right? I hear a lot of young people say this that, well, I'm still young. Why do I need to make a purpose? Like a lot of things are changing. How useful is it anyway? But I think to me, it's your anchor. It gives you something to start with. It gives you a way to go about your life that's not just going with the flow. And so there's something about having a draft so that you can have something that you can continue to refine. And the big difference here is really about intentionality versus certainty. You don't really have to be sure, like, you don't have to be looking for the perfect sign before you go ahead and go after your purpose. Some people say that having a purpose, it might box me in. I'm still young. But it won't. I honestly think it won't. And so I recommend being intentional instead of being certain. Intentionality is moving with deliberateness. It's something that you've studied carefully and then you make that decision. You can intentionally do something even if you're not certain about it. So, what's important is that you're going into that situation knowing that you don't know everything. And because you don't know everything, you're going into that situation because you want to learn. Again, intentionality does not guarantee certainty, but intentionality does contribute to being strategic. And if you think about it, a more strategic approach really just helps you to decide what you want to say yes to or what you want to say no to. Because there's so many things happening and everything can be overwhelming. But the realistic thing is you cannot go after everything because you have a very limited amount of time and effort. And so if you have this strategic approach where you're being intentional, then it can help you balance out what you need to do or what you want to do. And being strategic, it doesn't box you into a certain path or it doesn't box you to just one plan. Because actually, what the research is telling us is being strategic helps you be even more flexible. It helps you to be even more agile because if you're intentionally going after the things that make sense for you or the things that you want to learn, then you can make decisions in a more efficient and hopefully in an easier manner. So that's really the important thing here is you just want to draft it. Just start. And so now there might be some of you thinking, oh, okay, so how do I use all of that for the job hunt, right? Having a purpose, it doesn't make you special. A lot of people think that, okay, I'll write out my purpose and then the next time I meet a recruiter, I'm just going to recite it. It doesn't work that way, to be honest, because recruiters, they know that some of you will have prepared a purpose statement already. What makes you special is how you talk about that purpose. It's the way you talk about it that will help you stand out. Because at the end of the day, anyone can write out a purpose statement. But if you're that person who has taken the time to actually reflect on why that's the thing that matters to you, that will show when you're talking to a recruiter. And that is how your purpose can give you a competitive advantage over other people. Then also, if you think about it, what you want to learn is just as important as the things you already know. If you remember the table that I had earlier, right? The one that gave me my vague idea of my purpose. Whenever I would talk about those things as I was recruiting for Microsoft, they would always appreciate it also when I talk about the things I don't know yet, but I'd like to learn. And so that might be a good tip for you, right? Just don't just show your expertise, also show your curiosities. And really, that's the end of it. And a quick review, these are the top three tough tips that I'd like you to remember. So, number one, purpose gives you coherence, focus, and direction. Number two, live purpose forward. Show people your essence. And then number three, having a draft purpose gives you something to refine. And drafts are okay because we do not have to be sure about it. Why do I call them tough tips, right? So it's not just a tongue twister. These are tough tips because these are really hard to do. Drafting your purpose, I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's something that you just wake up one day and you know. It's something that requires a lot of inward reflection. It's about talking to people you trust, asking them to give them their impression of you or what they think about you. And I think it's really very tough because you have to be honest about what you're not honest about. And it's about asking yourself a lot of questions so you can eventually be as honest as you can be to yourself. And it's hard, but if there's anything that you learn from today, I hope that you see that hard work pays off. It pays off because it helps you get to know yourself more, and I think there's nothing more precious than that, than knowing you're working towards something that can contribute and make an impact to the world around you. So, with that, I just want to quickly pause here and ask you, what is one thing that you will make sure to remember from tonight? So, please go ahead and type that in the chat window. All right, so a word or a phrase that will do. Yes. Oh, I like that line. Don't be afraid to write something down. Yeah, just start. Like a tip that I got actually, and if you see my notebooks, they're all not lined. So they're blank pages. This is something that a leader in Microsoft, so the head of learning of all of Microsoft, he said I should write on blank pages so I don't get scared to just be on the lines. And then I thought, oh, that's a really good tip. Okay, so I'll let you guys write down what are the things you want to remember. We still have some more time, but I'll go ahead and bring us to the next slide. And so, just a quick check. Let's see if we got our objectives done. So, number one, we said that we wanted to gain insights on the importance of having purpose as an anchor. I shared with you some research, and if you're interested to read up some more, I do have a reference slide that maybe I'll send to Deirdre later, and you can research on your own if you'd like to read up more. Next, I hope you have deepened your understanding of purpose. You can see that it's a very nuanced construct, as what we like to call it in psychology. It's a nuanced construct that has a lot of layers. So, the more you understand about purpose, I hope the easier it becomes to start drafting your own. And then lastly, we said that we would gather some tips that will support us as we try to draft our purpose and use it in our job hunt. So you have your top three tough tips. Hopefully that can work. And then hopefully my example can show you how it's a journey of refining vague ideas to being a bit more clear. And then who knows, right? Maybe in 2 years' time, I have a different version of my purpose again. So that's really the message here. I hope one day, maybe tonight after a webinar, or maybe next year, I hope you take a moment to think through what are those things that you'd like to influence and impact in the world around you, and what is something unique to you that can bring about that impact. And so, with that, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. If you want updates on more webinars or more workshops, I do have a Facebook page and I post the different schedules there. So hopefully I will see you again in the future. And with that, I will turn you over to Deirdre now. I think we have time for some questions.
Yes, we do have time for some questions. So thank you, Elijah, for this very insightful session. And if any of our participants now would want to ask you some questions, maybe it's about the topic or maybe
Mhm.
it's about Elijah's experiences so far, go ahead and ask that in the comment section of the video now. And usually, what we've done with these webinars is it takes them a bit of time to warm up and type up their questions.
Mhm.
So I'm just gonna mention some highlights for me. I think like one of the things that I learned so much is it's so impactful to introduce yourself using your purpose statement. Um, that is something that is not very common, and I think
Mhm.
it'll make you memorable to anyone you're introducing yourself to. I
Yeah, especially to recruiters, right? If it's a stranger that you're meeting for the first time.
or even in networking events. So as an
Yes.
introvert, I really panic about how I introduce myself in events like that. So I think that's a nice way to be remembered.
Mhm.
All right. And another thing is I really appreciate like the structure that you gave for how you drafted your own purpose statement of like putting like how,
Mhm.
for who, and to what result or impact. Because I've actually done not really like a purpose statement, but I worked on my mission statement like 4 or 5 years ago. And it's like this long thing. And I just patterned it out of like how companies do it. So it's nice that I will get to refine my mission statement based on the structure that you gave.
Yeah, so there's actually Pete Carroll. So he is the head coach of Seattle Seahawks. It's a super famous like football team in Seattle. And Pete Carroll, everyone loves him because he's like one of the best leaders with the best ideas. What he says is, as a general guideline, try to have 20 words or less in your purpose statement. And so it's a little bit hard, especially when you're just new to drafting it. But he says, and 20 is a that's the maximum length for your purpose statement, because then if you go beyond 20 it gets harder to distill the essence of it. And so if you start talking about it to other people, they won't remember it very well if it's 20. And and the other thing is, he said, the shorter your purpose statement, that means the clearer it is in your head, because you actually took the time to think about it and refine it. And so yeah, maybe a good tip to try for all of you. Once you already have a long draft, don't try to force yourself to make it 20 words or less in the first try, because that will be just really really impossible.
Yeah, I think it also circles back to what you said. I think your first tough tip, which is your purpose gives you coherence, focus, and direction. And I
Mhm.
think the best way to really focus that purpose is to keep it short.
Mhm.
Because I think like at the current state of my mission statement, because it's so long, it doesn't necessarily give me the focus that I wanted from it. In fact, it's really quite general.
Mhm.
So now it's like whatever career path I go to, in the end, it's still applicable, which I think is a scary thing, because I don't think each career path that I've done is really a fit for my purpose or for my mission here. So thank you so much for that tip. Okay, so I'm
Mhm.
checking the Facebook Live if we have any questions coming in. So, again, for those who are still on the live session, please comment your questions for Elijah if you have any. I guess I'm curious about what you said. You asked yourself, like, how bad is it really in the Philippines? And you spent 2 years here now. You're almost 2 years back. I wanted to know if you got any close to answering that question for yourself.
Good point. So, I think for me, I'm starting to redefine that. So I don't. It started out being like, is it really so bad? But now I'm getting a better understanding that maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the right question is, well, where are we now, and what led us to being where we are? And then the other question I think is, and so where do we want to go and what can get us there? I think at this point I've realized that it's not very useful if I keep on asking myself, is it so bad or are we so behind? I now see how that's not a very productive way of thinking about our societal problems.
And so maybe you have a draft of the answer to where are we now with the Philippines in terms of not just I think learning and development but how we manage people in general.
Yeah, I think based on what I'm seeing, a lot of how we do things is still very tight control on people. It's like it's operating from a place of maybe fear and not a lot of trust yet into employees being self-directed or employees being able to have their own freedom to get to the goal or to get to the outcome. And so I think that doesn't mean it's worse, right? Like that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that maybe society wise we haven't really had the chance to explore going after outcomes. Like all we've done is really take orders and wait for command. And so that's what shows up in companies also. Like we look for leaders who give us the answers. Leaders expect people to ask them for answers. But I think what might be a good opportunity now, especially with this COVID thing happening, it forced everyone to work from home, and it's forcing a lot of managers to rethink how they manage, which I think is a very very good thing because we want things to move in the direction of trying to be outcome based. That once you're very clear about the end goal or the outcome, then you can just empower people to do their work however way they prefer, or empower people to use their time for what they want to do. So I think that's not a an exact answer to your question of where are we now, but just in terms of seeing the difference of the work culture here and abroad, that's one of the, I guess, most stark differences that you can immediately notice.
I think also I agree with what you said that it's not necessarily wrong or bad,
Yeah.
because there was a period in time where that actually worked,
Mm-hmm.
when a clear set of instructions really meant more quality products. But as I think as work evolves in general, that also means that how we manage people has to evolve and grow. So I think we've just been slow learners, or late bloomers in that regard. But I think, like you, I have hope, especially given that a lot of companies have been adjusting and have
Mm-hmm.
been forced to like trust their employees at home. I think it's great that we start seeing them like catch up and go towards that.
Yeah, I know we have a question, but just quickly on that. I think it's that hope that, I hate it. I'm not a cheesy person, and so I hate like going to the hope is that thing, but I think what's happening now is a lot of the ideas that we saw a lot of companies in the States implement about 5 years ago. So, like Microsoft being so rara about culture and purpose, we're seeing results now. Like a lot of people are seeing that, okay, that worked for Microsoft because it's not just improving everyone's emotions, it's also giving them 1 trillion market cap, the only company that until now is valued at the $1 trillion. And so they're seeing business results. And I think that's what gives us hope, right? Because now a lot of companies, not just in the Philippines, they're seeing the value of being purposeful, of looking into culture. And I think that should be something that can give us hope also, right? As people who are young, who are going to work with these companies or in these companies, that we can be those people pointing out the importance of purpose and culture. And so it would be nice if we come in and the change has already happened, but I think the thing about being hopeful is we can be the ones bringing that change in, which I think is something more fun and more challenging.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So we have one
Yes.
question here from Lara. She asked, "Is it possible to convince or encourage friends and colleagues to draft their purpose instead of just working because they have to? And how do you do this?"
So it's always hard, right, when we try to convince people to reflect and to be self-aware. And so I think the easiest and not so easy answer is to start with yourself. I think once you have your purpose drafted and once you start talking about that, I think that's the biggest test here. Like you can draft your purpose on your own all you want, but it's not until you share that out with other people that's where you can start really seeing the influence. And so I would say the how, to answer the how in your question, it's really try to start with yourself first and then start talking about it with the people around you, your friends, your colleagues. I think once you start talking about it, they'll see how different the conversation is. And then maybe that's what will encourage them to also draft their own purpose.
And I think what one thing you can also do is share Elijah's video to your friends if they want to learn more about drafting your purpose. Because
Mhm.
again, this video will just stay in the group for as long as the group
Yeah.
exists. So you can invite your friends over and have them watch this video. Okay, we have a second
Okay.
question from Rain. He said, "I've read some interview tips saying that your purpose should be anchored to a personal experience. Is it really required to have an anecdotal reference like a story for your purpose? Or is it okay if it's just something that you're passionate about?" And I think this is partly coming from your story with Simon, because the
Mhm.
way he introduced himself, it's also something rooted from his personal experience. So what's your take on this?
I think it's not a requirement at all. I think it's just that when you do have a story, it's easier to talk about it. Because, right, we know that storytelling is a very effective method to highlight specific scenes in your life or to highlight your values. But I think, being so young and still in the very, very beginning of our careers, we all don't necessarily have stories that we can pull. Sometimes it's just we feel very, very passionate about something. And I think for me, my personal take is that should be enough. Like, it should be enough that you feel so strongly about something to talk about it or to go after it. And so I would say though, maybe once you've figured out what is that thing you're passionate about, try to reflect a little bit, like how did you get that passion? Like what is that thing that prompted you to start looking it up or to start reading about it? Because maybe that's where your story can come from, right? The story doesn't have to be like this huge dramatic thing that happened in your life. It can just be a random day where you started researching on something and why that became important for you. So that could be a story already.
All right. And then we have a third question from Christina. So, what are some strategies or perhaps tools you can use to start exploring what your purpose is? Next best step after deciding to draft one.
Okay. So number one, it's good to research. So just read as many books as you can. Books about maybe mindset and behavior. So these psychology kind of books or business books, a lot of them would talk about like knowing who you are and your identity and how that translates to work. So it's just nice to gather up all that knowledge and look at the all the ideas that everyone else are writing about. That's one way, I think. And then the second is talk to your friends. And when you talk to your friends, don't just make it like a random chica moment. Like ask them, what's your impression of me? What do you think do I do in my job? Or you can also ask the people who are close to you, what do you think is my talent? What are my strengths? What do you come to me for? Like, what do you like about me? So it's things like that that maybe might help you get an understanding of that's how people see you, and then you can try to ask yourself, okay, is that accurate, or is that how I want to be seen? Is that who I want to be? And then maybe from there you can go ahead and do another revision of your purpose.
All right. Thank you, Elijah. And I think this segues perfectly into something we're gonna announce tomorrow, which is one of our next webinars will be about prototyping your career. So I think one of the steps that you can do after you've drafted your purpose is to try it out also for yourself. So we'll be talking about the different ways that you can do this, like finding someone who perhaps has a similar purpose or is related to your purpose, and then try to ask about it. Because I think the whole point about drafting your purpose is you're constantly refining it,
Yes.
and it's totally okay if you realize that 5 or 10 years down the line, hey, this was my purpose when I was like in my 20s, but now I found a different purpose, or I learned so much from it that I now have to refine it into something else that may still be related to your original purpose. So that's a little bit of what we'll be talking about in our next webinar in the last week of April. So we'll be announcing that tomorrow. But I guess we have no more questions. So we'd like to thank you first for staying with us this entire session, and for again spending another lockdown evening with us learning. And I wanted to extend my thank you to you, Elijah, for this very, very insightful session on drafting your purpose. It definitely gave me, at least I know I can speak for myself, it definitely gave me a lot to think about. And I hope our learners in liyab also um, have some points to think about, especially with regards to their purpose before they start thinking of what then do I do with my career and my job hunt and everything after that. So at least they have an anchor or something to ground themselves
Mhm.
on with how they go through their life. So thank you so much,
Right. Thank
Eliza.
you guys.
All right, and thank you everyone. That ends our session, and we will see you next week for a live chat from someone from Invested. So we have Maurice, who was able to land the job before she graduated, and even as an average student, she was able to do that, and that's with the help of Invested. So we'll be joined by Maurice and a representative from Invested next week for a live chat. So see you then. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.